Great to have you here
Welcome to the podcast.
with me and my guests from around the world. Welcome to the Simone Filer podcast.
Welcome to this podcast.
Let's get into it, shall we? On the Simone Filer podcast, I have the resilient and inspirational Toni Lontis with me today. Toni's journey has seen incredible growth, true to the title of her first memoir, Resilience Memoir of a Broken Little Girl Discovering a Woman of Strength and Beauty. Not only an author, she's a ghostwriter, an international coach and speaker on trauma, the host of Radio Toni online at W4WN and Toni TV, as well as an international podcaster. Welcome, Toni Lontis.
Oh, thank you, Simone. That's a lovely intro. Thank you very much.
That's a lovely intro. It's true, all of it. You're amazing. You have achieved so much. I met you about 2.5 years ago, Toni, when I recorded you self-narrating your memoir. And hasn't your life just totally exploded?
It has, and that's actually in part to meeting you. I'd just written the book and I was looking for an audiobook producer, and I had no idea that I would end up narrating that. And I had no intent originally in narrating it myself, because I was going to get a professional voiceover person to do that. And then you kept saying, you need to do it, Toni. You need to do it yourself. There'll be something special about you doing it yourself. And so this is to a person who was scared to pick up the phone and talk to someone I didn't know, very introverted and closed off. And Simone's gentle encouragement of me to narrate that book was what started this journey, because at the end of it, after, many takes and in-betweens and lots of tears, and it was a very cathartic reading of my book. And at the end of it, you said to me, your voice is beautiful. Have you ever thought about radio? And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I'm guessing that the universe, nothing's ever by chance. I don't believe anymore. I really don't believe it anymore, because what's happened since that time is nothing short of mind-blowing. From my perspective as well, I am completely in awe of the way the universe has worked in my life in particular, and in that whole just saying yes. And to see what's grown from that just saying yes, it leaves me filled with gratitude and gratefulness. And there's not a day that I don't go on radio that I don't actually think about you and am reminded that I am here because of your beautiful comment. I never knew that I would love radio so much, that I would be so passionate about its ability to connect with people and tell their story. So that's all down to you, sweetheart.
If I provided all of that and got you to where, well, just with that comment, then I'm so grateful that I said that as well.
You don't know the power of your words. And if there's anything that I've discovered along the way, the power of your words is important. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, and no matter what you have to say, the power of your words can change people's lives. And this is just, I'm a living example of that, darling.
That's so cool. So you talked about the universe. How spiritual are you? And tell me a little bit about your spirituality.
So I grew up in a fundamental Christian setting where my mother was a Christian, but my father wasn't. So there was a lot of angst around going to church and around Christianity. And as I got towards my early adulthood, I started to question some of the people and the relationships that were purportedly Christians. As you know, I'm a gentle, kind soul. And some of the behavior that I saw was just not right. I try very hard not to judge anyone and accept everyone for who they are and what their truth is. And I found in that environment that there was a lot of judgment of other people, and a lot of judgment of me in particular as I grew older. And so I guess I kind of stepped away from that church and Christianity until I got into my 40s, when I started that journey of self-discovery and healing. So there's a good 20 years of hard life and living before I embarked on what I call my spiritual and self-development journey. And I kind of discovered that I never actually lost sight that I absolutely believe that there is a stronger, higher power that guides us. I just don't necessarily think of that now in terms of God. I actually think of it in terms of a higher energy. And for me, once you start living the life that you're meant to lead, and once you start delving into what drives your passions and what lights you up, and you keep with that, despite what anyone else says. And I mean, I had people say to me, "You're crazy. You're in your mid-50s. Why would you go and do online radio now? Like, why would you put yourself out there?" But the more I did it, despite myself, and I tell you, the first 6 months of live radio, I felt sick every time I got in front of that microphone. Every time I felt sick. Like, what are you doing? Who the hell do you think you are? What do you think you can tell the world? All those sorts of things. And I just kept doing it. And the more that I did it, the more I felt it was meant to be. And the more I felt that the universe was leading. And then so moving on from that, I just know that the people that I meet, that the people that are drawn to connect to me are meant to. And I see that happen every single day in all the conversations that I have. And it may just be an interview, it may be a collaboration, it may be a lifelong friend like you and I. It'll be whatever it's meant to be, but I absolutely have no doubt that there's divine intervention in how that works. No doubt whatsoever, because I've experienced it so often in my life. So yes, a general belief that there is a higher guiding power, and that that higher guiding power wants the best for us and our lives. And for some people, that's a big fat life. And for some people, that's a gentle, beautiful life. So be that like you and doing what you love on radio and podcasting, or it may be that your calling in life is to visit old people in aged care. Whatever your calling is, do that, and do that absolutely. And you will find that you are happier, more fulfilled, and divinely led, so to speak.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. If you find absolute joy in what you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And you'll know if there's angst around what you do. Yes, there's some stress, and yes, there's times when you'll feel, oh my God, I'm
Am I doing the right
scared.
thing?
But that's part of growth. And if you lean into it versus leaning away from it, you'll grow and continue to grow. And that's what life's about, isn't it?
It certainly is. So do you meditate?
I do. I've actually started to be very strict about my meditation. So first thing in the morning, last thing at night. And if I'm stressed during the day, I'll do a 5-minute calming meditation. I've increasingly found the busier that I get, the more I need to do it. And it has absolutely become a key part of my life. And sometimes it's like 2 minutes of a morning. Other times it's like, half an hour. It just depends on what the day's doing. But yes, definitely.
Have you always meditated, or is it something that you've just
No.
found recently?
I did it haphazardly as part of my healing journey. And then I've had lots of wonderful people on the radio. And one of those wonderful guests sent me a little morning meditation. And it's just, I think it's about 7 minutes long. But gosh, it's the most beautiful thing. And her voice and her message in that little meditation that she gave me just helps set the day up. And I think for me, knowing that I'm going to have a really busy day and knowing that I have that 5 minutes of calm, it kind of settles my brain, because I have a big, creative, active brain. So in my head at any one time, there's, 50 things to do, 20 people to contact, a list of to do that's as long as my arm. So if I don't do that quiet meditation, I get really overwhelmed and anxious. And as you know, I've always battled with depression and anxiety. The depression seems to be pretty good now that I do what I love, but the anxiety, I still have to work with that, and meditation is part of that. So, yeah, it took a long while to get into that routine, but gosh, it helps. It really
Yeah,
does help.
yeah, I agree with that too. I've only learned meditation recently in the last 4 years, and I certainly
Yes.
agree it helps. But I want to go back to, well, thank you firstly for sharing all of that. That's amazing. I also want to go back to your catalyst for writing Resilience, because in your, well,
Yeah.
earlier on, you definitely experienced a lot of trauma. So what was the
Yes.
catalyst for actually putting pen to paper and getting it out?
When I started looking for healing and doing self-development in my 40s, and as I started to heal, part of that process was journaling and writing things down to get them out of my head and on paper. And the more I healed, I started to open up and tell people little bits and pieces about, my life and what had happened. And as I did that, the resounding response was, you need to write about this. People need to hear about this. And so eventually I just made a decision. It finally came down to that: make a decision and do it. And so I think that that decision was made in January 2018. And I went on and sort of fluffed around the edges, I guess, and kept doing what I was doing until about July. And then again, it's like, right, I need to do this now. And so I wrote from July until November, I think it was, and finished the book and then published it in January 2019. And that's just been my journey since. The
That
writing
was,
of the book led to you and the conversation, and then onto radio. And yes, I've probably got another couple of books in my head, but it's about finding the time to do that.
yeah, that's exactly right. Did you find writing Resilience release the trauma that you'd gone through? Did it help?
It was incredibly difficult to write. It was painful to write. It was challenging to write and hard to write. And so the writing was cathartic. And then going on to produce the audiobook with you, that was another big release of pain. Like, we shared many tears and
Yes, we
hugs.
did. A box
And
of
then,
tissues each.
yeah. And that sort of released a lot of the pain.
It's
And
good.
then moving on from there, there's been additional bits that I've had to work through and further boundaries that I've had to put up around family. And that's something that it is really important to remind listeners, is that sometimes in writing a traumatic story, it's not easy. But if you have a deep burning desire that's not about you and more about helping, showing, inspiring, empowering, educating people, then you do it, and do it anyway. So is it easy to talk about family dysfunction and trauma like sexual abuse and divorce and all of those things? No, it's not, because it opens you up to your flaws. And I'm the first one to say that I am still an incredibly flawed human. But part of my journey is to show people that that's okay, that the human experience is often filled with traumatic events, but you can get through them, you can heal, and you can thrive. That the getting through is part of the journey, and that the trauma is part of the journey in your story. And the best way to get through it is to embrace it, accept it, and know that you can't change the past. You only have control of you and what happens to you now and in this moment. So by not dwelling on the past, and yes, I freely talk about it, it no longer impacts me in the way that it does. It no longer triggers me in the way that it does. And I talk about it so that other people know that you can get through trauma of any level and come out the other side and have a wonderful, happy, joyous life.
I'm sure a lot of people listening will be thankful that you've said those words. So after the release of that, you started coaching people. How did the decision to do that come about?
I actually sort of fell into it, and I still sort of fall into it. I love to help people. And as someone said to me the other day, you've got so much knowledge and experience in that head of yours. And for me, it kind of happens effortlessly. That's people will ask questions and I'll just readily answer them. Try this, try that. This might work, that might. And it still happens all the time that people will just write and ask. I had a wonderful message from a gentleman last night on one of the social media platforms, and he was just saying, I've just read a little bit about you, and my wife has struggled with depression and my daughter has just been diagnosed with anxiety, and I'm not sure what to do. And so just a simple discussion with him to say, okay, you're not alone. This is tough stuff and it's hard to walk through, and you need to, number one, make sure you look after yourself, and then you can help your wife and daughter. And here's the things that help me. They may or may not work for you and your family, but here's something to try. So a lot of people just need that one voice that'll say, it's okay, this is tough, this is hard, it's going to be okay. It might not be okay today, but here's some things that helped me. You know, that's a real blessing to come from that standpoint. And I don't take it lightly, and I'm incredibly grateful that I actually am able to talk the talk. So I've been there, I've done that, I've survived, here's what I learned. And that's not from a point of I'm better than you or I know more than you. It's just, this is my experience. And if it helps you, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, that's okay too.
And you've gone even further because you also do public speaking on the topic. So obviously helping large groups. How's that for you? How do you find it?
Again, I still get nervous, and I like to, I'll prepare and I'll write everything down. But the best talks I've ever done are the unscripted ones, where I just listen to what my heart and soul says that I need to say and just say it. That's a bit scary because people would say, you know, you need to be prepared and have your script. But I'm finding increasingly that my way is the unscripted way. And I need to stick to that because that allows that soul connection, and it also allows that deeper inner intuition and that empathy that are my superpowers to be transferred to the audience. And that's important. So I try and take a deep breath and go, this is going to be what it needs to be. You've done the prep work. You know what you need to talk about. Just do it. I'm still learning. I still feel like I'm learning to do that. I'm a perfectionist by nature. I like to be prepared. So go into something like that, not as prepared as I feel that I should be, it's still scary stuff, but it does seem to help a lot of people, and it does seem to help them see that it's okay to be human. Because there's so many people out there that do things so wonderfully perfectly. But at the end of the day, there's only one you, and you're unique in this world. So I can't do what you do. You can't do what I do. And that's okay, because the world needs unique people with a unique voice and a unique story. And that's what I try and encourage people to do in their lives.
And you also host retreats to do the same thing as well.
Oh, my poor retreats.
Oh, yeah, COVID came and wrecked everything. That's right.
I know. We had 2 retreats to the Philippines organised this year, where we were going to sponsor a feeding program in one of the poor communities in Manila. And so we were going to do the feeding program with them and then go stay as an individual group in individual villages' homes, so that we got to experience just what it's like to live in that environment in a 24-hour space. So we were going to do that and visit some more charities in Manila, do some sightseeing, and then we were going to jump on a little plane and go to Coron, which is a beautiful island off the coast of Manila, and do some self-care, little workshops and classes with the team that I was with, and, you know, massage and hikes and meditation, etc. And then COVID came. So my May and November retreats are no longer. As to what will happen next year, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I was really excited about that.
They did sound fabulous.
We will try again in 21, 22, I'm guessing.
Yeah, just pop it on hold for the moment. I think they would be amazing things
Yeah.
to attend. But now you are a confident radio host, like you said at the beginning. I just had to say you got a beautiful voice, and then boom, you just took off. So how did it actually happen? I mean, we had that conversation. Did you go looking for being on the radio, or how did it actually
I
happen?
I actually didn't. I actually when you said that to me, I just poo-hooed it in my brain and said, yeah, like hell, this introvert scared of picking up the phone's never going to talk on radio. Ha ha. And so it must have like stuck in my head because as part of marketing the book, I was building my social media platforms and I connected to a media person in the US, the owner of a big media company. And something just, and we just had a little, social media conversation. And partway through that conversation, I said, so do you know anything about podcasting? Like the naivety, here's this guy who has like multiple radio stations and part of live radio is the podcasting portion of it. And so he said, well, sure, let's jump on a call. And eventually took a little while to get that call set up because he was calling from Florida in the US. And of course, I'm in Australia. But when we finally got on the call, it wasn't centered on podcasting. And I started to learn about the distinguishment between online live radio and podcasting. And as the conversation went along, he started to say, have you thought about hosting your own live radio show? And I'm like, hell no. I just want to know about podcasting.
There's this
Anyway,
thing that keeps banging at my door, radio.
yeah, that's pretty much like it was. And I determined earlier in the year that 2019 was going to be my year of saying yes. No matter how terrified I was, no matter how scared I was going to say yes to things that I never thought possible and yes to things that scared the hell out of me. And so here's this guy telling me about what online radio was like, and it was about going on a live show and talking live to an audience and interacting with them. And then once the live show's done, they audit it, produce it, and convert it to a podcast. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting, but how do I do that? You're in America, I'm in Australia. Like, how does that work? And then he continued to tell me that, I can be home in my little studio and connect via Skype or Zoom, neither of which I had any experience with or knowledge about. And we connect you to a technician in the US and they help you produce your show. And so I thought, oh, okay. And then I sort of said, look, and he told me the cost of the packages and what they meant. And it meant being on radio consistently every week for 12 months. Got off the phone and talked to my husband and he said, well, why don't you give it a go? And so I did. And as I said before, the first 6 months of that show, I was sick, physically sick every time I went to jump on the show. And I still get nervous from time to time if I'm talking to someone I'm really fascinated or interested in. I get a little nervous still. But what grew from that was the connectiveness to the live audience, their ability to send questions and ask questions, and the joy that it seemed to bring to the listeners from whoever guest I had on the show. And as I started to get more confident, I started to get more positive feedback. Like, you're really professional, you're really well organized, you ask the best questions, those sorts of things, which encouraged me to keep going. Towards the end of last year, I thought, this is a pretty good gig. I actually like this. I think I'll try and help others do the same thing. So that's when I've gone into more collaborative programs because people have fear around doing something new. People have fear around live radio and speaking to a live audience. And so I developed my newest program, which is around collaborating with business owners so that they host or are co-hosted in a co-host format to have their own shows, and they get to have their business and the story of their business into the US market, which, as you know, is just massive. The power of having a live show and also having the podcast, it's like getting two bangs for the one show and not having to do the actual auditing. That works for me. For other people, though, they love the process of podcasting, where the interview is pre-recorded, audited, you put in the intros and outros, and off you go. There's a discipline around live radio, as you would know. You have to be there. It's like live TV. You're on at this time of the day. There's not much that, you have to go on live no matter what. And so
Yep.
I've learnt to go with the flow and experience the internet drops out, there's a hurricane and you can't have your show, can't get guests online, the internet clocks out, those sorts of things. And that's been part of my journey, is to just take a deep breath and just keep going. I've had co-hosted shows where the co-host, it was her show and she completely dropped out and I had to continue the show on her behalf. And so that means like thinking quickly and going, okay, guys, throw to a song. Don't care what song, just throw to a song. And I ran around my office and found a book, and then I started reading from a book and tried to clone what she was going to say. Those sorts of things make it fascinating for me. And being able, again, to show people that things don't have to be perfect. Life doesn't have to be perfect. Live radio is certainly not perfect.
Well, we used to have a saying, luckily it's not brain surgery. You'd go off air. Right. So many different things could happen.
I know, and they do happen. And I used to again, it used to make me sick, because that perfectionist part of me was like, oh my God, I've stuffed it up. And then my technician would come on and go, Toni, that was brilliant. Didn't you see the engagement from the audience? And I'd go, oh, but it was just, I did miss this and I forgot to do that. And she'll go, it's okay. And so my confidence grew. And so that's what I want to give back to people, is that it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to give it a go. For the people that are needing to hear your message, they'll hear it. Doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Doesn't matter if it's not exactly how you envisioned it. It's right as it is. And that's the thing that I love most about live radio. And of course, then the podcast comes back and it's like got all the audits and edits, and it goes, oh, well, that's my bit. That's good.
That's perfect. So on Radio Toni, do you talk about trauma? When you first got into it, we had a chat and you said we're talking about exposing trauma so that more people can understand that they're not alone. That's still the main concept?
I actually like to play around with it now a bit. So I have a show at the moment where I'm highlighting authors, because I know what that journey's like. So I've got some wonderful authors on the show. I do still like to talk about that tragedy to triumph, and I still have lots of people that approach me with a particular story that I will put on the show and talk to them about. Increasingly, I'm getting lots of young people doing amazing things. I recently interviewed a 17-year-old CEO who is still doing grade 12.
Wow.
And who manages 104 conservation projects across the world whilst doing grade 12.
What a legend.
And coming up, I've got a 14-year-old TV podcaster from the UK who is living her dream, and I'm going to talk to her as well. So there's amazing, that's what lights me up, telling people's stories. Live radio is perfect for that. And then, of course, there's also my love for talking to business owners. And there's so many unique businesses that have so many wonderful products, services as well. And I just, like last week, I spoke to an ex-FBI analyst about finance fraud. How cool is that?
That's cool.
Like, what a job, hey? Like,
yeah, you're learning so much.
Part of the joy is I get to talk to those people and tell other people, hey, did you know, bloody, bloody, blah. Did you know if you're in business, you've got to protect yourself from money laundering? I didn't know that. Did you know that? Like,
No.
I love to learn. You know, I have a big curious brain. I just like to learn. So I get to pass that stuff on to other people. What a
Yeah.
gig, hey?
Yeah, you got a great gig. So you were just saying before that you're getting business owners into co-host shows. If anyone's got a business
Yes.
and they want to do that, how do they contact you? Is that still happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting inquiries from business owners all the time. So I've got two principal platforms. One's in Florida and one's in California. The one in California has a lot more technology around it. So it's called radio, but it's actually live streaming audio and video. And the power of that is that I live stream into all my socials. So LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. It live streams into their socials, and you can combine that with a business social. So you're getting 3 live streams plus the networks that BBS radio goes into. So there's 350 other live streaming networks. So you've got all that exposure in the North American market, and it's not just
Wow.
confined to the North American market. It's across Australia, because the trick that we try to make the use of is that you can find times that are good in Australia and equally good in the US. So we try and aim for like a drive time in the US, which is like that 5 to 7 time, which in Australia is that 11 till 12, which is kind of lunchtime crowd. So that not only do you get the live streaming bonus across all of those platforms, you get the social media bonuses. And then once all your live shows done, it's converted to a podcast and then goes out to all the podcasting platforms. So it's kind of, again, that 2 bangs for your buck. I hate that word bangs, but I can't think of anything else to say. There's
Google.
a live option and a static option. And if people understand the size of the North American market, and when you combine that with Canada, the UK and Australia, it's a great opportunity for people to hear about you and what your business does. And so I can be contacted at info@tonilontis.com. Any of my socials. Radio Toni has its own Facebook page. I've got a Radio Toni website, so that's just simply radiotoni.com. And I love to chat. So the websites have got a contact form. Send me an email and say, hey, I heard you speaking the other day about XYZ. I'd really love to talk to you further. And we'll just jump on a call and see if it's a right fit for you. It doesn't work for everyone because, as I said, different businesses do different things and have a different structure. But usually we can find a way. And then once they sign up for a business package, pay their deposit, we do a formal marketing and strategy program to say, okay, this week we're going to cover this. Next week we're going to cover that. So they have a plan of what we're going to cover to get the best parts and elements of them, their business, live to the audience.
Well, you've certainly made it very intriguing. So I have been having pull-throughs go through with how people can contact you. So is Radio Toni the best website?
Radiotoni.com has all the information and contact. It's got, you can listen to the shows. You can see the current business collaboratives that I'm working with. Radiotoni.com, definitely. But ToniLontis.com also has similar information. The radio stuff on the website has lots of information, and you can download freebies about audio and producing good sound. And currently we're working on an online course called Online Radio and Podcasting Made Easy, and we're hoping to have that up in the not too distant future.
Wow. Well, it certainly has exploded. Like I said at the beginning, look at you. You are a professional now.
I still don't consider myself as professional as you, though. I still feel that there's so much to learn, and I keep wanting to learn. Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. From when you first came into the booth, you were very nervous to begin with, but by the end of recording your audio book, you were like killing it.
I was scared. I was scared. So when you don't know what you can accomplish if you just give it a go, and if that whole feel the fear and do it anyway, it's so powerful, because fear is just in your head. You're not actually going to die from getting behind a microphone. Yes, you might flop, and yes, things don't go perfectly, but what could happen if you did? What
That's
could
right.
happen if you just gave it a go?
Well, it sounds like you need to contact Toni if you want to get out there and get promoted, and also do a touch of radio as well. Maybe even have your own show.
Oh, fantastic. And I tell you, all the authors who might be listening today, if you don't get Simone to do your audiobook, you're crazy, because she just does the best job and she is so encouraging and nurturing. I'm proof in the pudding.
Thank you, Toni. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad that we met and that you've, it's helped you go on this journey, and congratulations. You are just so inspirational and resilient. And get Resilience, Toni's memoir. It's an amazing read. You can see where she's come from. And just by listening to this, you can see how far this amazingly inspirational woman has come. All the best for the future. I can imagine it's going to be incredibly bright, Toni.
I've no doubt that your podcast will be equally successful, because I love your voice as well. You know, it's a very nurturing, wonderful voice. And I'm telling you guys, it was a voice that helped me get through a lot of things, reading and narrating my book. And again, I would not be here if it wasn't for this wonderful woman and the things that she did and helped me with. And I will always be grateful.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you, Toni. I appreciate that. And thanks for coming on today.
My absolute pleasure.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And my guests from around the world.
Thank you for being a part of this show.
The Simone Filer Podcast. Catch you next time.
It's a wrap.